In the latest survey by real estate firm Has Consult, demand for housing units in exclusive suburbs has continued to soar as prime attractions for buyers also soar. The Q4 indices show a strong demand drive for exclusive suburbs that are less built up over suburbs that have high-density developments. Despite a modest 0.1% increase in asking property prices in Nairobi's suburbs, there were pockets of stellar performance in the Q4 of 2016, with Muthaiga leading the pack in suburbs that recorded double-digit increases in asking property prices. Muthaiga was the best-performing suburb, with average prices in the area increasing by 15.8% in 2016, followed by Kitisuru at 14.2% and Langata at 13.5%. Similarly, detached houses, which are mostly found in low-density suburbs, recorded the best performance for the year, posting an annual 11.3% increase.
If they had a lot of funds, they would perhaps think of dropping the rates so that they could play into a more volume market. What I have personally seen in the industry is that a lot of companies, a lot of developers are getting financing internationally at between 4 to 6%, and even getting it at 4 to 6% hedges their exchange rate risk.
All right, and now joining us to help us understand the property index even more, we are joined by the head of research at Has Consult, that is Sakina Hassan Ali. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. So according to the report, you say demand for housing in suburbs is soaring, and Muthaiga happens to be taking the largest piece of it at 15.8%. What are the key drivers for this?
Well, I would have to say that very similarly to global phenomenons, when economic environments slow down like it did in Nairobi, what you'll have is the high-end segment of the market holding still and even increasing in pricing, whereas the middle and lower income markets do tend to stagger a bit, and that's what we've seen this year, rather last year. We saw that Muthaiga, Kitisuru, Gigiri, Langata, all high-end, low-density suburbs actually increased quite dramatically in price, whereas Kilimani, Westland saw some drops, and those are suburbs that have more middle-income housing with higher density populations.
So according to your report, you're actually also seeing a lot of oversupplied towns. So when we're seeing oversupplied towns, does this mean the demand is going to the less supplied towns?
There's oversupply of large apartments within Nairobi. And that's what's causing a price glut in that particular market. In terms of the satellite towns, what we're seeing is there's increased demand for land, but not necessarily increased demand for properties to buy or to rent. And this is very typical of a sluggish economic environment, where those sort of areas do stabilize a bit, as there've been very many corporate layoffs, and what we're seeing is people are getting a little tighter on their budgets month on month, which means buying activity does go down. Rental activity also does go down.
All right. Have we seen any demand for newer areas? Because when you mentioned Muthaiga, Kitisuru, and Langata, it seems to be more of what people are actually demanding for. But have we seen any new towns coming up in demand for property?
So what we saw that was kind of very surprising, a very staggering figure, was that land in Juja has gone up 50% in the last year. That's a really big increase. It's not something we see very often. And we attribute this mainly to the infrastructure upgrade of the Thika Highway that's made this area a lot more accessible. In the last 5-6 years, what we've seen is these kind of increases in the towns along that highway that were closer to Nairobi. So we're looking at Ruiru, Kiambu, those sort of areas. But now it's actually moving further away and creating price appreciation further down Thika Road, even now at Juja.
All right, rent has gone up by 4%. Is this something we should tie to the economic times in the country? And if yes, what does this mean for us?
Well, the increase of rent has been 4% annually, and just to give you some perspective, that's about 3 or 4 times less than it has been in years before that. So we're seeing rent price correction, certainly. It had overheated in 2014, and we believe it's correcting itself in 2015 and 16. It also speaks volumes about how much more supply there is in the rental market, which is giving people a bit more of an option of lower priced properties, and sometimes increased supply in the rental pool will reduce rental prices.
All right, let me pick your brain on this. 2017, we haven't kicked off to a good start of the year. Economically speaking, if you look at the macro environment factors that could affect our economy, and it being an election year, do you think that this is going to spill over into the property market?
Well, interestingly enough, election years have 2 strong trends. One is that the buying activity does slow down as people adopt a wait-and-see attitude. They want to know if there's any instability that will be caused by the election after August. And so they just sort of tamper down on their buying activities. The other phenomenon is actually the opposite of that, where you have a lot of increased election spending, which increases circulation of money in the market. And that increased liquidity in the market actually spurs the growth of all sectors, property included. So it's just a matter of seeing which one will actually trump the other. Will the dampened buying spirits from potential investors rule the increased liquidity spending spur?
All right, so if I give an example of what's happening at the Nairobi Securities Exchange, we are seeing investors preferring treasury bonds and not investing much in equities. Does the same thing happen with property, where you are seeing demand for, say, rentals going up, and then demand for, owning 100% property going down just because of the macroeconomic factors?
Interestingly enough, well, one of the biggest reasons that we still won't see big moves into home ownership and home purchases is because the current lending cap isn't really proving very effective, because banks have become very conservative in their lending. So what we're seeing is that there's not much change on that front in terms of the uptake of mortgages. So people are moving towards renting because that's really the only option. But we are not seeing that big an effect on rents at the moment. I think they had overheated earlier in the year, and they're slightly correcting now.
All right. What does 2017 look like for you?
Well, it's kind of interesting because we're a month into the year, and we've seen a lot more activity than we had expected. It was very quiet from April to September last year, but things picked up in November and December, and January has been surprisingly active. We weren't expecting it. So we do think that there is some hope, at least for the first quarter. Things may slow down a little bit in the third quarter in the run-up to elections, but I think on overall it may not be a year of rampant increases in property prices, but I think it'll very stably go up, as it has in the last year.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Sakina. We do appreciate the update. Sakina Hassan Ali, who is the head of research at Has Consult, talking to us about their latest property index report. Of course, that does put Muthaiga as having the highest demand for property. The Muthaiga area at about 15.8%, Kitusuru at 14.2%, and Langata at 13.5%. Let's take a